What's going on, everybody, and welcome on in to the Dawg House, our OBR Cleveland Browns preview show every week here on Tuesday night at 7 p.m. I am your host, Michael Keefe. Find me online at Garage Beers Mike. And listen, go follow the OBR everywhere the OBR is, whether it's at theobr.com. Make sure you go there and you get subscribed to the OBR for all the best written content, all the most in-depth, well thought out written content. Again, I am constantly in awe listening to my OBR brothers and sisters talking about what they're going to write about and what they're going to do this week. So all that can be done at theobr.com. Make sure you get subscribed. And wherever you're tuning in here tonight, whether it's YouTube, I see a lot of you on YouTube already. Make sure you hit follow, hit subscribe, and like the video, all that. And whether you're watching on Twitch, we love our Twitch people. And even if you're just hanging out on Twitter or X or whatever the heck we're going to call Twitter at this point. But if you're watching over there, welcome in. We love having you. And we have got a really fun show because it's my first of this year, partly because we didn't have a lot of the same teams on the schedule last year. But for other reasons, it's my first recurrent guest, and I'm excited to have him. And this dude is my guest tonight. He's putting it all. He is dedicating himself to the show tonight. Let's just say that my guest is dedicating himself to the show. I had him on twice last year, and I got him on again tonight. And I'm wasting no time because I'm kind of prepared to get my ass kicked here, to be honest. I don't know how you guys are all feeling in the chat. I don't know if you're watching later. I've mentally prepared, not by my guest, but sort of by my guest. My guest is great. He's a nice dude. I don't expect him to come in here and kick my ass per se, but it's Browns Ravens week. And the way things have gone. I don't know if we're excited. I'm excited to watch the Browns on Sunday just because we only get so many chances every year to do it. But oh man, the Ravens come in playing really well. The Browns come in playing the opposite of that. And I don't know, maybe you guys can talk me up. Maybe in the comments, you guys could talk me up and get me feeling like by the end of this, I could look at Chris in the comments already. We can win. Maybe you guys are going to make me feel that way. So when we get to the end of this episode, I feel like picking the Browns over the Ravens. I don't know if I'm feeling it. Look at Sancho says, "Oh, Ravens, oof." Zook is not feeling confident, but you know what? We're going to try to keep it positive here. And I'm going to bring in my special guest from the car. Because I asked him to come on. We had a really good time with this guy last year. He is the host of the Locked On Ravens podcast. He does a lot of stuff covering the Ravens. And I know my job is to bring people in here that you're going to hate, especially when it comes to the Ravens and the Steelers and the Bengals. It's just hard to do. And I really like talking with this guy a couple of times last year. So I'm going to bring him in right now. It's Kevin Oestreicher from the Locked On Ravens podcast. Kevin, man, welcome back to the Dawg House.
Man, I appreciate being here. And this is a whole bunch of firsts because this is my first ever car interview on a stage like this, covering the Ravens. So we're having a whole bunch of firsts tonight. But yeah, we're in the car. We're mobile. Man, it's going to be, I think, a better game than some people anticipate on Sunday. But the Ravens, there's no denying that they're coming in scorching hot. And Cleveland right now is certainly looking for some answers.
It's been a week. It's Tuesday, Kevin, and it's been a week here in Cleveland. It's been a week, buddy.
Yeah. I just, watching from afar, well, not too afar because obviously, got to keep tabs on the AFC North. It's been a struggle for Cleveland. I mean, I will say, and the one thing for fantasy football, I did everything I could to invest all that I could in as many Nick Chubb stocks as humanly possible. And now, obviously, him being back was great to see him get in the end zone last week. Such a feel-good story there. So I might have to bench him this week just because, obviously, it's Ravens-Browns week. But, man, that to me is one of the big good storylines in Cleveland. I know it's been hard to find those, unfortunately, for you guys this year.
I think you're close, Kevin. I think even if it wasn't the Ravens this week, I still don't know that Nick Chubb's getting a full workload yet.
Yeah.
He got a pretty decent workload in the first half, and then they kind of sat him the second half of the Bengals game. But I don't know he's back to full workload. So lucky for you guys this week, but tough go on the fantasy league. Hey, if we're going to start with fantasy, Kevin, I got a bone to pick with you.
Oh, all right. Let's hear it.
We got a bone to pick. So I draft Mark Andrews thinking, hey, listen,
Oh no.
kind of a mid-round guy. I'm thinking
Yeah.
Mark Andrews is solid, right? What happens?
Right.
Week one.
Yeah.
Week one. Isaiah Likely. Best tight end in the game week one. I'm like, okay. So I feel like I had a couple guys on my team that I didn't love, Kevin. I had a couple guys on my team I didn't love. I
Yeah.
said, I'm going to jump in line first. I'm going to grab Isaiah Likely, and I'm going to do we've got multiple flex positions in this league. So I'm like, I'm going to do like
All right.
the
Yeah.
Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely play.
Oh.
And somebody's going to come up big. You know what's happened this whole season, Kevin?
Yep. I know exactly what's happened.
Every
It's
time I
been
play
the
both of them, they both stinks. They both stink. And then every time I play Likely, Andrews, look at Andrews last night. What do you have? 2 touchdowns last night?
Yep.
And every time I play Andrews, Likely has a big game. I hate these guys.
Isn't that just how it always goes though? Like, especially even if you're into like sports betting, like, you're on FanDuel, you're putting together a parlay, and it's like, oh, this guy's hit on, let's say, the anytime touchdown like last 6 weeks, right? You're like, oh, this is a shoe-in, and then you miss the parlay by one leg, and it's like, okay, of course the guy who's done it the whole year doesn't do it. There were some people, and again, I run like pretty Ravens-centric Locked On Ravens leagues, and there were people dropping Mark Andrews left and right, and I said, man, all right, I'll take Mark Andrews. Like, I'm putting him on my team. There's so much to bet on the talent, but the thing that makes this Ravens offense so different, and why there's been frustration, I'm sure, and look, it's been plenty of it for the Ravens skill position players this season, not from their perspective, but from a fantasy perspective, is this is no longer the chuck it up, Mark Andrews is down there somewhere offense in the passing game, which is what it has been, and that's why Mark Andrews had his role. But his role is just different this year, where now Rashad Bateman's getting involved. You mentioned Likely's getting involved. Flowers will get involved. You have other guys. Justice Hill playing a big role this season. And obviously, Derrick Henry commands a pretty large amount of touches as well. So it's more of a spread it out, pick your poison type of offense, as opposed to this passing offense is Mark Andrews and nobody else. But from a fantasy perspective, obviously that creates some conflicts when it comes to which one of these guys to start every week.
Well, listen, if you want to get more in-depth on the Ravens, if you can stomach it here in Cleveland, getting more in-depth on the Ravens, check out Kevin again on the Locked On Ravens podcast. And then you're still doing Ravens Wire, right? You're still writing for Ravens Wire?
Yep, Ravens Wire.
If you want to do a little reading, jump in with Kevin on Ravens Wire, where he writes there. But all right, Kevin, let's start with your team, and let's give them all the credit they deserve. And
let's go. I'm ready.
It's an interesting, I will say, and I'm interested to hear your take on it, because we saw, in my opinion, I think last night against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we saw kind of a standard Ravens game from this year, in that offensively, this Baltimore Ravens team is incredible so far to start this year. I mean, whether you're talking about Lamar Jackson continuing to play on an MVP type level, whether you're talking about this, you had to damn know it was going to happen. We knew it when the minute it happened in Cleveland, when they signed Derrick Henry. You had to know that it was going to be. It's been 2 years of Derrick Henry just kind of waddling about in Tennessee, and all of a sudden here he is with Lamar Jackson.
Right.
And here's this career resurgence for Derrick Henry. You've got the wide receivers playing well, the offensive line playing well. I mean, the Ravens offense, when you look at the rankings, they're top 5 in pretty much everything. And they're number 1 in a lot of things offensively this year. So this offense is just humming.
They're incredible. And I know, look, there was a situation when this signing happened where I thought that this exact path could be it, where it's like, okay, you put Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson in the same backfield, and like, how do you stop that? Like, that's an unstoppable duo. I didn't expect it to come about this quickly, I think, has been the biggest shock to me, especially because Baltimore lost 3 starters on their offensive line, including, I know, an old friend in Cleveland, Kevin Zeitler, who went to the Detroit Lions. And so you're thinking, well, okay, it's going to definitely take some time. And look, at first 2 weeks, the offensive line didn't look too great. And we certainly saw that. But as this has gone on, what has made the offense so effective, some of it is like, that pick your poison type of offense. But the other part of it is like, the play action game has been so good for them over the course of this year, because we know if teams want to run play action, they can't do it effectively if the run game doesn't work. Because if you fake a handoff and you're facing like the last ranked rushing team in a league, the defense will look at you and be like, okay, yeah, right. Like, yeah, sure, you're handing the ball off, right? That doesn't work. But when you have Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, and the word that I like to use a lot is gravity, like Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, I know an Ohio State guy, those two were great in Baltimore. Like, there was no issue with what they did, but they don't have the same gravity as a Derrick Henry. And so when the Ravens were lining up with Gus or JK and Lamar in the backfield, you would always kind of lean towards Lamar. It's like, okay, we know we have to stop this guy. We can get away with maybe cheating off of JK or Gus a little bit. You can't do that with Derrick Henry. And so when you try to stack the box and the Ravens say, okay, well, now we're going to just throw the ball over top in our heavier personnel because of guys like Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. And then you have guys one-on-one like Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman. So it's a well-oiled machine in Baltimore right now. And all of it is because of the play of Lamar Jackson, who, again, I remember, we were sitting there in 2019 after the Ravens season. That was a historic rushing offense. And I sat there and I'm like, man, when are these numbers ever going to be broken again? Like, this is historic. These are incredible numbers. They're blowing historic records out of the water. And here we are 5 years later, and all of those records are set to be shattered on an even bigger historical pace. Lamar Jackson is playing really well. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, especially when we get into the defensive side of the ball. But right now, this team's calling card is their offense. And more importantly, and I think the game last night, we kind of saw this, they ran Derrick Henry just 4 times in that first half. They got out to, it wasn't their big 41-point lead, but they scored points with Lamar Jackson in his arms. Something they've been able to do forever. This is not a new thing. But I know the misconception about Baltimore is, they only run the ball and that's all they can do. I mean, Lamar Jackson is putting on the best performances we've seen from him in his career this season with better decision-making, just going through his reads, not being panicked, and it's all coming together for him, which I think it's been a very welcome sight in Baltimore, I'll say.
Well, let's go back to Derrick Henry for a minute, because I don't know if people, I don't know, maybe it's because what's going on here in Cleveland, even for me, that I'm like, the game ends on Sunday and I'm like, I'm tuned out.
Yeah, right.
And we've had baseball going on here in Cleveland, so I'm like, I'm focusing somewhere else because of these games.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know if people understand what Derrick Henry is doing there. He's like, there's a shot and finishes this game against Cleveland this week at 1,000 yards on the season. The dude's on pace to break the single season rushing record. It's not just like, oh, Derrick Henry looks pretty good there. Derrick Henry looks maybe better than he ever has.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people, especially those last couple of years in Tennessee when the Titans' offensive line was really porous and there was really a ton of talent around him, people were saying, and it wasn't even just, go to Baltimore, it was go anywhere with like a competent offensive line and skill position players around him, a good quarterback, and see what he does. Just so happened it was Baltimore. I might have to give a little tip of the cap to Jerry Jones on that one for not exploring that option a little more. But it ended up working in Baltimore's favor. And for Derrick Henry, he's doing everything, because with him, there is I think the other misconception, particularly about Derrick, is that he's just a bruiser. Like, you see his big hulking frame, you see how big he is, and it's like, okay, he's just this big, slow bruiser. Derrick Henry's reaching 20 plus miles an hour. When he gets going, the last thing I'd want to do, and look, I don't have the build of a football player, right? I know that he would toss me aside and send me 5 rows deep in the stands. But for anybody, it's like you get Derrick Henry coming downhill at you, I'm moving out of the way. There's nothing, because when he gets going, that's when he's at his most dangerous. And so the speed is big. Him getting to the second level, throwing guys off of him, it's been such a welcome sight for this Ravens team, because what it is also doing is it's taking a lot of the pressure off of Lamar. Where in Baltimore, it's been, all right, Lamar has to put on a Superman cape at times. He has to go and do his thing. He has to save the team, and he's certainly done that this season. But for Derrick, he can almost like come in and kind of like do like a tag out for Lamar and say, hey, let me take this for you. And it's crazy because we in Baltimore become so numb to Lamar Jackson greatness, where it's like we know it's happening, but we just see it every week because we're obviously watching. And, he jukes out 5 guys, avoids a sack, and throws a crazy ball to Isaiah Likely. Everyone's like, oh, man, like, that's so crazy. And we're like, yeah, okay, that's Lamar. For Derrick Henry, it's been 7 weeks. And we've seen him with multiple 80-plus yard runs, almost a 200-yard game already. He's breaking 100 every game. And he does this. And I'm sitting there after he has, a $160+ last night. And I'm like, okay, Like that's pretty good. It's pretty good for Derrick Henry. It is unbelievable. And I mean, this is an A+ signing. I know that everybody gets so caught up with running backs and that age 30. That age scares so many people away about, oh, well, this is the sharp decline. The Ravens had it happen to him in real time. Mark Ingram hit 30
Yes.
and immediately, came off a 15 touchdown season and just declined off the face of the earth. It happens. But with a guy like Derrick Henry, who puts multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars into his body every season, has been so consistently good. I mean, you have to be able to just, even if he wasn't playing in Baltimore, just respect the greatness, because in all honesty, what we're looking at right now, if the season ended today, we're probably looking at the MVP of the league and the offensive player of the league of the year on the Ravens and Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry.
Yeah, and listen, we'll get to the defense, and then I'll have fun criticizing things, because right now I know what it feels like. I'm saying nice things about the Ravens but you can't look at this offense. You can't look at what they are doing. And we're talking about this running game. And I want to point out for everybody, and I know you're not going to like this, Browns fans. I know you're not going to like this. But Derrick Henry's got almost 900 yards rushing on the season. Lamar Jackson's got almost 500 yards rushing on the season. And the leading rusher for the Cleveland Browns. Now, we haven't had Nick Chubb, so take it for what it's worth.
Yep, fair enough, yep.
Just thinking of the way these games are going, the leading rusher for the Cleveland Browns so far this year is Jerome Ford with 264 yards. So it's just been this onslaught of you guys. And then when you watch Ravens games, Kevin, and it's exactly what you're saying. I think there's reasons for concern with Derrick Henry, because we're talking about a man that's had a ton of carries, and he's getting a pretty good amount of carries this year. He's got a few games of 24 carries, 25 carries. So he's getting a good amount of carries. You do have to have a little bit of concern with a guy that's a little bit older about just breaking down over the course of a year. And I know you guys don't want to think about that, and he's not showing any signs of that right now, but it's something you got to think about. But the Ravens have just continuously gotten better and better and better and better at, like, exactly what you said. Every team knows they've got to go in there and stop that run game, because you got Derrick Henry running for 6.5 yards a game. You got Lamar or 6.5 yards a carry. You got Lamar running for almost about the same as far as his yards per carry. And then Lamar drops back and just starts throwing. And I think there's this thing, and you talked about it, Kevin. I think there's this thing around the league. It's not just Cleveland. I think there's this thing around the league that Lamar is still a guy that, like, when he puts up the throwing numbers, everybody's like, whoa, look at that throwing game by Lamar.
Yeah.
And in reality, he's been a really good passer of the football for a few years now.
Yeah, he has. And I know that a lot of people, he was a raw player coming out of college. And I think people just ran with that in ways that I, had never seen before on that scale. A lot of players come out of college raw. A lot of players have areas they need to improve upon. But Lamar had put up incredible passing numbers at Louisville. There were some issues with a couple of different things with him, not even just passing. Like, he as a player needed to really get ready for the NFL game, mature, and just continue to grow year to year. But that is every single young quarterback. I mean, it to me, with Lamar, we've been through here in Baltimore so many different iterations of, what's the next thing that people are talking about with Lamar. We've been through he can't throw outside the numbers. We've been through he can't, throw the deep ball. We've been through, he can't do this, he can't do that. The only thing, now that he's playing at this pace, I think people are now shifting into, he can't win in the playoffs. He hasn't won in the playoffs. Like, I don't trust Baltimore in the playoffs because of Lamar, this, that, and the other. And I'm just like, can we not just appreciate, like, what's going on here with Lamar? Like, that to me is what I look at with him, because we've seen the evolution, we've seen the maturation. He's not a perfect player. Nobody is. Nobody is. But I think it's been the thing that I'm choosing to kind of revel in right now is the fact that he played at such a high level during his MVP year last year. And now he has just taken it to a whole nother one. And this is the best Lamar Jackson that we have seen. And the fact that he has had, because the thing with the Ravens last season, if you want to get into the whole playoff situation, obviously they didn't do their job in the Kansas City game. They abandoned their identity. They weren't really battle tested last year. Like they had the game that we saw against Tampa last night, that was pretty much like most of their wins last year. Now, Deshaun Watson came out and stuck it to them at their own stadium. That was, I think that's the game that everybody in Cleveland was like, oh, this could be. And then obviously we saw what happened before the Achilles tear. But that game against Cleveland where Deshaun Watson did that, that was one of the games where Baltimore had to face adversity. They had a couple others over the course of the year, but they didn't have a lot of it. This year, they've had to come back on Cincinnati to win that game. They had to weather multiple fourth quarter comebacks. And again, that is more of an indictment on the defense than it is impressive, in my opinion, but we'll talk about that. There's so much that Lamar has done for this organization over the past 6+ years. Obviously, this is the sixth year as a starter. But he's been a good thrower of the football ever since he came out of college. It has just been him growing as a passer every season, him growing as an NFL football player, him growing as a starter. And that, to me, is what every young quarterback goes through. But obviously, Lamar has gotten a lot of praise this season. I'm not trying to say, oh, Lamar only gets criticized. That's not true. But there are narratives out there still. And, to me, it's just like he's never going to be in an offense, at least not now, that he's going to be required to throw for 375 yards and 4 touchdowns every game. That's just not their identity. But people look at the pure raw passing yards, pure raw passing touchdowns, and they judge him based off of that. When in reality, I call it the eye test. I mean, if you watch the games, he has such an impact on the game just from, again, that gravity perspective. It makes him really exciting and amazing to watch every week.
Hey, I don't want you to think, Kevin, because I know we've got a good little thing happening here, and we're cool with each other and all that. I don't want you to think that's how all of Cleveland feels.
No.
I want to put some of this up. The only thing world's fastest fat man wants to hear about Baltimore is that it broke off and sank into the sea. I want you to know that we still really struggle with you, even if
I hear you. I hear you.
Okay. Yep. These comments are coming left and right, and I want to make sure that people understand that in Baltimore. So here's an interesting. I want to switch over. And obviously, we've got a situation forthcoming that we don't really know what it's going to look like. We do know that offensively, since we have been talking a lot about the Baltimore Ravens offense, the Cleveland Browns offense ranks last in pretty much any and everything, almost everything. I mean, we're down there with the worst teams in the league. And the majority of that was with Deshaun Watson, and it was with a lot of injuries on the offensive line, and obviously no Nick Chubb and all that. But our starting quarterback that we were trying to build this thing around just showed again that he is likely not that guy. And then he goes out in this game against Cincinnati with the Achilles tear. And they had DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, listed as the backup. You guys are familiar with DTR because he made his first ever start against Baltimore. That was a tough one last year.
Yeah.
And then eventually Jameis Winston came into the game, and DTR suffered an injury, which is the only reason Jameis could come into the game. But I would imagine, I don't know anything, but I would imagine Jameis Winston is going to be the starting quarterback against the Baltimore Ravens this week. But I always like to ask, and you know this from last year, I always like to ask the perspective, not just around the league, but around the AFC North. And as somebody who covers one of our rival teams, you and I did 2 shows last year, Kevin.
Yep.
That we're talking about 2 teams that are running for the AFC North, 2 teams that were battling it out. Obviously, the DTR game the Ravens ran away with, but the win, I mean, really, I don't think there was a higher situation last year for the Browns than that win against Baltimore. I mean, we felt like we were flying in the city that week, just the way that game went. And these are 2 teams that were looking like, all right, these 2 teams are built to make runs. They're built for this. They're built. And here's the Browns in 1 year later. And they're one of the worst offensive teams in football. So I don't know, man. Baltimore perspective on what's going on, your perspective on what's going on in Cleveland, and your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's just tough. I mean, personally, I was never really a fan of the Watson trade. And I know I've said this on this show before, so this shouldn't be, like I'm not making this revelation for the first time, but I wasn't necessarily a fan of the Watson trade just because of obviously multiple different factors that went into that. And Cleveland just hasn't had the opportunity to build through the draft as much as they would like to because so many of those picks went to Houston. And I thought that they did. I mean, I thought the Jerry Jeudy acquisition was coming from the right place. I mean, I thought that giving him the extension, what was it, 3 years, 56 or something like that, 60, something along those lines. I mean, I understood why they did it because you couldn't trust Elijah Moore. You couldn't trust David Bell. Obviously, then they got involved in the Brandon Ayuk sweepstakes and kind of dangled Amari Cooper out there. And I think Amari felt some type of way about that and just other situations. And now you're in a situation where coming into the year, this whole season for Cleveland, just from the outside looking in, was on Deshaun Watson. And just like, could he become not even just his Houston stuff? Could he just become even just a mini sliver of like what he showed in Houston? Because the defense, in my opinion, I know it hasn't been like the total like dominant number one in everything defense, but they have enough talent on the defensive side of the ball to weather that storm. And we saw that last year where their defense actively won them games in efforts where their offense was trying to lose it for them. But it just has been so bad offensively for them this season, obviously with Deshaun at the helm, where the defense couldn't even save you in some of these situations. And that's when it's like really bad. So obviously Watson goes out. I don't know anything either, obviously, but if it is Winston in week 8 against Baltimore, I know the perception of the city and just Ravens fans in general is like, man, we really wanted to see Deshaun. Like that is what people felt was the Ravens' best shot to win, because now it's like, okay, Cleveland clearly had so much invested in Watson. There was so much pressure. They weren't making a change that was painfully obvious. So it's like, okay, now with Jameis coming in, what do they have to lose? Like that can be a more dangerous situation than all this pressure on you, because pressure bursts pipes or makes diamonds, and obviously it was bursting pipes with Deshaun over in Cleveland. But now Jameis comes in, and now there's no Amari Cooper, right? That obviously is a big loss, and now you're down your top wide receiver. You mentioned the injuries on the offensive line, which has been just brutal. But for a Cleveland team that, again, it's like, all right, what do they have to lose now at the quarterback position? Jameis can come in and kind of play more freely than Deshaun was. I mean, it was clear that Deshaun was facing a ton of pressure and he wasn't handling it well. He wasn't handling it well at all. So now Jameis can come in, and the mood of Baltimore is like, man, Baltimore wanted to see Deshaun. Like, that's the vibe that I got, was like, oh man, now that Deshaun is down, it's like, is Jameis a more dangerous player than Deshaun? The answer here in Baltimore, from what I've seen, is like, yeah. Like, they feel like Jameis gives Cleveland a better shot than Deshaun would to win them that game on Sunday.
Well, and I think Baltimore and Cleveland would agree a lot about that. And I believe, Kevin, that it's going to be a better Cleveland offense than what anybody has seen so far. And I think part of that comes back to health. They're getting a little healthier. Listen, Amari Cooper, it stinks that it wasn't working out, but he also was really struggling in Cleveland, and maybe it has to do with some of that stuff. And but he was really struggling here. There were a couple moments this year where there's a couple plays in Cleveland this year, Kevin, that you can look at specific moments and say, all right, maybe this 1-win team probably should be looking at 3 wins. I mean, for crying out loud, just the littlest rinky-dink, terrible holding penalty. They throw a long touchdown to Amari Cooper in that Raiders game. It gets called back, just horrendous. There have been moments. I don't think the Browns are as bad as their record says, but their offense has been bad. Now, Nick Chubb back and probably getting more run this week. And Jameis Winston, I believe Jameis Winston is a player that's better suited to play in Kevin Stefanski's offense. I believe Jameis Winston is a guy that's going to drop back. He's going to you're going to get pressures because the offensive line has struggled, but they're even a little healthier than they have been. But he's a guy that drops back. If it's a 3-step drop, a 1-step drop, a 5-step drop, he's going to drop back, turn, and fire the ball. And that's what Kevin Stefanski's offense is predicated on. Like, you've got to get rid of the football. Sean couldn't do it. But I do think I have to know something, Kevin, because I have to know if this is you or me. Do you have a cat?
Yes. The reason that I'm in the car is we just adopted a cat.
All right.
So she is already making herself available for the mics. She already has a lot to say about the Ravens and the Browns. That's what we got going on here.
I am sitting here. I swear to God, I'm sitting here going, "Oh my God, is there a cat that got into?"
No.
I don't have a cat. I'm
No,
like,
yes.
get into my basement. Like,
Yeah, so I'm not driving the car. Obviously, I have the cat on my lap, and
All right.
she is giving her. I don't know what the predictions are, but she's giving the predictions for the Browns Ravens game.
I heard her say Browns by 20.
Oh, is that what you heard?
It's a great cat.
Okay.
Browns.
Yeah.
No, I'm very glad you said that because I was sitting here like, "Where's this cat?"
Yeah.
I think you're going to get a better fight out of this Browns offense, and I think Jameis Winston. I don't know what he's going to produce, Kevin. I don't know that he's going to go out there and throw for, but I think Jameis is kind of that gunslinger type quarterback. A lot of like what you saw in Joe Flacco. Now, is Jameis as good as Joe Flacco? I don't know. Man, Jameis has put up a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns in this league. He's put up a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns in this league. I don't know if he's still capable of doing it, but man, just based on the first several weeks of the season, I think you're going to get more hope out of Browns fans that this is going to be at least a much more competitive game than you might have gotten if Deshaun Watson was still the starting quarterback.
Yeah, and I think just for Cleveland from the outside looking in, it just feels like when every time Deshaun stepped on the field, there was no hope. And it was just like, all right, here we go again. And obviously the organization wasn't making a change. And it was like, all right, well, now it's another week of this. And then it's another week. And then it's another week. But now with Jameis coming in, like, maybe he won't win every single game coming in, but I just think it gives you more of an opportunity to win games. Because again, Jameis is a guy that's not, you mentioned it, he's a gunslinger. He's not afraid to air the ball out, to make risky plays. And if he makes a mistake, he's not going to be thinking, oh man, well now I have to make this next throw, and now I have to make this next one. It's going to be, all right, made a mistake, let's get back on it next drive. I think for Deshaun, it was he lived and died with every single throw. And for Jameis, I agree. I mean, I think it gives the Browns a better opportunity to win games moving forward. Obviously, their record right now has put them in a really, really bad spot. If Jameis comes in and is like the savior here, which, I mean, we've seen Jameis come in and, is a backup type guy, or just like a low-level, high-end backup type player and win games for teams. But I think that gives you a better shot if you're Cleveland, because I don't know how much this team believed. Like, it just kind of felt like, okay, going through the motions, let's see what happens. Defense playing hard, they're making some stops. Offense can't get anything going. Balls are getting overthrown, going in the dirt. Jameis, he's a high potential, high turnover player. He's going to make mistakes. He's going to turn the ball over. Like, that just comes with the territory with Jameis, obviously with 30 seasons and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I'd rather take that if I'm Cleveland as opposed to what the product that we had seen from the first. I mean, we're more than a third of the way through the season now. Like, it is not just maybe this is just a blip on the radar. This is we have a sample size, and that was the sample size. So I think for Cleveland, Jameis gives them the better shot.
If Deshaun Watson was living and dying with every throw, like dying with every throw is what we're going to say, then he had more lives than the cat that's on your lap. So it's an interesting look. Going back to the Ravens for a minute, Kevin, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on why things look the way they do, because I think I have an opinion on it. But interesting year on the defensive side of the ball for the Ravens, because as highly ranked in almost everything as the Ravens offense is, the defense is not like that. When you look at advanced rankings, they are kind of more middle of the league than anything else. But when you look at numbers, they are like a bottom of the league in pretty much in a whole bunch of defensive categories. So here's the question, because every time I see that, and every time I see it accompanied by the number one offense in the league, Kevin, it makes me feel like, man, is this offense out there striking quickly and this defense is just out on the field a ton? It also makes me feel like, and I look at the Ravens schedule and I go, they've played some pretty good offenses. This is a team that's played some pretty good offenses.
Yep.
So when you look at the numbers, is it a little bit, do the numbers tell the tale? And maybe is it a Ravens defense that maybe isn't quite the same as what we're used to seeing? Or is it maybe a little bit deceiving?
I think it's a little deceiving, but we now are at a point where it is a concern. And I think this is what they're going to have to deal with for a lot of the season, where this is not a talent issue, in my opinion. Baltimore has talent on all three levels. But they bring in a new defensive coordinator because they were forced to. Mike Macdonald goes to Seattle, and they promote Zach Orr from within. Zach Orr has never called plays, ever, any level. College, high school, pros, never. So with that, he played 3 years for the Ravens, back in the early 2010s. But it's different when you're adjusting to that. And there have been miscommunications. Mainly it's the secondary and the pass rush, which are the two biggest concerns. They've had guys like Calvin Noy, who they signed off the couch last year. They re-signed this year. He stepped up. They signed Yannick Ngakoue off the couch this year, and he ends up going. So hopefully they sign me off the couch next year, and I can go give them something in the pass rush department if they,
we'll handing out paycheck for sure.
Yeah, handing out couch contracts. I'll put myself up for nomination next year. But the thing that has been the most frustrating part, I think, with this defense is the inability to finish a lot of these games. Where we saw in week 3 against Dallas, they were up big. And part of that was on the offensive side of the ball, where the offensive play calling got conservative. Lamar called out multiple people on that, not in like a toxic way, but more in like a, hey, we need to put our foot on the gas. So then it, gets a little better, but then the secondary gives up almost 200 to Jamar Chase in week 5, and the Ravens somehow come back. Lamar puts on the Superman cape, as he has to do, pulls out that win. But then you have this week 7 game against Tampa where they're up 41-10. They're up 41-10 in this game. And the Ravens got outscored in the fourth quarter 24-7. The reason Chris Godwin got hurt was because, one, he was on the field with under a minute left. But the Ravens let the Bucs back in the game, and it was kind of like that real/fake comeback, which is like, are you really going to come down like 5 scores in the fourth quarter? But the Ravens made it. John Harbaugh went for it, up 17 in the third quarter, 4th and goal, scored a touchdown, and it actually mattered. Like, it mattered that they scored because the game ended up only being a 10-point win for the Ravens, and Tampa had the ball at the end. Baker decided to kind of, run and scramble and go down on the field and said, all right, I'm done with this. Let's just get off the field. But defensively, it's been a little bit more of a struggle for Roquan Smith this season. He had 18 tackles in the last game. I think he looked as best as he has this year, but that's been a struggle. They can't cover running backs out of the backfield. They let star receivers torch them. Marlon Humphrey by himself has had a great season, but they're dropping interceptions, and, situational play calling with Zach Orr, like I mentioned, hasn't been good. It has just been all this stuff piled up against each other. But these next 4 weeks, you mentioned a really good point that I've been kind of hammering home on Locked On Ravens, is that the first 7 weeks of the season for the Ravens, Patrick Mahomes, Gardner Minshew, who apparently is like, the Ravens can't beat him. He's like the Raven killer. Like, you can't escape him if you're the Ravens. Gardner Minshew week 2.
Right, he beat them with the Colts last year, didn't he?
Yeah. It's just it's inevitable. It's inevitable. Gardner Minshew beats the Ravens apparently. But so
he's like Thanos. Gardner Minshew is inevitable.
Literally, they graduated. AJ Green in Cincinnati was the Raven killer for years, and obviously he's a great player, right? Like, obviously it's that. But Gardner's just the guy who has the Ravens number. So it was Mahomes, it was Minshew, Dak Prescott, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels, Baker Mayfield in the first 7 weeks. That's a gauntlet, and it's not an excuse to play poorly, but it's like, that's a pretty big test. And that's Hall of Famers, that's guys in the MVP conversation. These next 4 weeks, you have Jameis Winston, presumably. Bo Nix, another Joe Burrow game, so maybe that gets a little dicey, and then Russell Wilson / Justin Fields, whatever the heck that quarterback situation looks like in Pittsburgh by the time we get there. So these next 4 weeks are going to tell me a lot about this Ravens defense, because if they struggle against a lot of these guys, then we might have a bigger problem on our hands here in Baltimore, because we can't stop. Look, it's one thing to struggle against a Mahomes, to struggle against an Allen, struggle against a Burrow. If you struggle against Bo Nix and you struggle against Russell Wilson, or at least this iteration of Russell Wilson, that maybe you're hitting the alarm bell a little bit more than you are right now.
Hey, can we just have can we have a moment together? Can we just have a quick moment together and talk about how much we freaking hate the Pittsburgh Steelers? What?
I'm telling you,
why can't they just suck like they're supposed to?
Mike Tomlin has the voodoo magic deal going on. I don't know what he did. I don't know what the agreement was, but it's the Mike Tomlin voodoo magic every single season. He somehow wills a team that has no business being the way that they are into a playoff spot. I mean, that team, especially last year, Kenny Pickett and Mr. Trubisky were actively just losing them games every single week. The defense was incredible, and they were just actively losing games. So it's Mason Rudolph, of all people, who comes in last year and leads that in the playoffs. Like, I'm just like, can we get 1 year of below 500 football in Pittsburgh. Just one singular year. Like
I just want to see him win 3 games.
Yeah,
3 games in 1 year.
We can definitely unite on that.
Yeah. Listen, on the other side, I think the Browns defense is much better than what the numbers might say. And I think,
Sure.
I think the Ravens will probably say that as they talk about the upcoming matchup. I think the players and the coaches will say that. I think the Browns defense, even in Cleveland, it's gotten, listen, with Cleveland fans right now, the Browns have gotten hate on every level. The GM gets hate, the coach gets hate, the owner gets hate, the quarterback gets hate. We saw that in the game. The running backs and everybody. Nobody's immune to, and they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be, because what we had last year, and they went through a lot of the same kind of injuries and the same kind of excuses they could have made. And you bring in Joe Flacco and you win 11 games and go to the playoffs.
Right.
And this year they just don't play well in any facet. I will say I think the defense gets entirely too much hate. Basically, what you'll see and what you'll probably see at the start of this game, Kevin, because it's been what it's been. Defense comes out, plays really well. They play well. They shut teams down. They look like the Browns defense that you expect. They are pressuring the hell out of quarterbacks. You got guys running for their lives back there. You got Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah out there blowing plays up left and right. You got the defensive backs making plays. And then all of a sudden the offense goes 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. And that defense is just on the field nonstop, just constantly. And generally by the end of the first half, the opposing team will make a play and they'll hit them with a big pass down the field and they'll do it. Just, I think the defense has just been, I think the numbers and the regression feels like it's much more of a product of the offense than it is the actual defense itself. And that, to me, as a Browns fan, Kevin, is where I'm most excited about a little bit of a healthier Nick Chubb still and Jameis Winston, because I'm hopeful that Jameis can just extend a couple drives. Even getting 2 first downs and punting the ball from the 45 instead of from the 20, it will make such a difference for the defense of this Cleveland Browns team.
Yeah, it will. And that's exactly what you kind of asked me about with the Ravens defense. It's like, when you go 3 and out consistently, your defense is tired going out there. Like, you're exhausted. The offense has drives of like a minute and a half. And then, you're getting, like, as the game goes on, you just get more and more walked down because you can't, it's tough for, no matter how good you are, no matter how many talented players you have to have an offense that complements your defense. And in Cleveland, they just, from the outside looking in, they haven't had that this season. So if you can put together some, 5, 6, 7 minute drives, that by proxy will help your defense out. It's why Baltimore and their defense was so successful for so many years, especially in the early era of Lamar Jackson and what Greg Roman kind of hung his hat on when he was the offensive coordinator in Baltimore. They would have 10-minute, 11-minute, 12-minute drives, just absolutely wear down that opposing defense. And Baltimore's defense is sitting on the sideline with the fans on. They're sipping on Gatorade. Like they're at the luxury resort, and the opposing defense is out there like breathing and gasping air for their lives. And that was the difference in some of these games, is like when you get to the fourth quarter, you're just gassed as a defense if your offense goes 3 and out like that. So I'm with you. I think that Cleveland's defense, obviously, even though the talent level is there, it's not a talent issue with these guys, but a better offensive unit will better their defensive unit, in my opinion.
All right, Kevin, you just got a cat. You're driving. Shout out to your driver for letting this happen for 45 minutes. I'm gonna ask 2 things, then we're gonna let you go. One, just give me your expectation of the way you think this game is gonna go down. I almost called it Cleveland Browns Stadium, Huntington Bank Field, on the shores of Lake Erie in Cleveland, where it is. I'm gonna tell you right from the start, Kevin, it's gonna be a weird atmosphere. It's going to be a weird environment there right now. You had a group of fans that booed that cheered when Deshaun Watson got hurt. And then that turned into the players saying a lot of stuff. Yeah, I got to tell you, they said a lot of weird stuff, but they said some stuff. So now there's this little thing going on, players and fans. It's going to be a weird, tense atmosphere, but I just don't know that it's going to be tense for the Ravens. It's a tension amongst the Browns. But tell me how you think this game's going to go.
I think that Baltimore will use that ground game. So for the Ravens, there is so much that they can do as an offense, as we talked about. So for me, for this Ravens team, I think they're going to try to establish the run early. I think they're going to try to work play action off of that if they can get it going. And then defensively, it's going to be about stopping Nick Chubb and placing the ball in Jameis's hands and making him beat you. Because, again, we know that Nick Chubb is not the 100% healthy version of himself. But even still, that's a really talented football player. And if you can shut down, for any offense, opposing offense, if you can shut down one aspect of that, you can pin your ears back and sell out to stop the other part without fearing that the threat of the other part will hurt you. So I think they're going to try to shut down the run game. Baltimore's run defense has been really good. Last night against Tampa was the worst showing they've had. But if the Ravens can get up big, get up early, let's say it's a 10-0 lead, 14-3 lead, I think that will force the Browns to maybe abandon the run game a little earlier than they want to and figure that out. Now, Jameis can do some damage against this Ravens secondary. They're going to have receivers step up. Obviously, David Njoku, the Ravens have struggled to cover running backs and tight ends, particularly this season. So it could be a big David Njoku game in this one, especially if they can't get that sealed up. But the thing about this Ravens team is that there was always that, another narrative we've had to deal with here is that, the Ravens, they can't come from behind and win games. If you get up on them, then they can't throw to win the game. There's so many ways that they can lose games. There's so many ways they can win it. But hopefully, the biggest thing I'm hoping, first of all, no ties. I despise ties. I cannot. No ties, please.
Second of all, I think we'd take it at this point.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, clearly, yeah, for sure. But the other part is, if you watch the Monday night game, there was laundry on that field after every single play.
Yes.
For the Ravens and for the Bucs. I would just like a cleanly officiated game. There will be penalties on both sides. But I think that if the Ravens can work out of that and not have that happen, because we heard Bill Belichick on the Manning cast say the Ravens' biggest opponent is themselves at this point. Like, they beat themselves a lot of the time, where you got to give the teams credit. Like, again, last year, the Ravens, they beat themselves against the Colts. They beat themselves against the Steelers. Cleveland was the only team last year that beat the Ravens. Deshaun Watson was the only quarterback that beat the Ravens because the Browns wanted that game more. They out-physicaled the Ravens. Deshaun obviously had that half of a lifetime. So if Cleveland gets up and gets motivated for this game, the Ravens have a habit sometimes of falling into those trap games, which is, this is a Cleveland team that's starting a new quarterback. They just lost their starter for this season. Their offensive line is banged up. They've played poorly this year overall. They have a habit sometimes of not overlooking teams, but falling into those trap situations. But I don't expect – this just feels like a different team. I don't expect that to happen this year. Again, as I mentioned at the top, I think it'll be maybe a bit more competitive than people think, but I'm still going to go with the Ravens victory. And I don't know if you're in the final score business, but I'll give one. I will go Ravens 25, Browns 18. I always guess like generic scores, like it's going to be 21 to 14. There's always some weird thing that happens that makes the score super weird. So I'm going to go 25-18 Ravens in a closer game, maybe final score wise, but maybe the Ravens just kind of have decent control, but not blowout control for most of the game.
I'll tell you what, here's one thing that I think the Browns need to focus on if they want to stay competitive with the Ravens. And this is not picking on Lamar Jackson's throwing ability. I've already raved about it enough. We don't need to go back to that. But I do think that a lot of Lamar's biggest plays, when he escapes the pocket, gets out, creates extra time for himself, and then he is so lethal throwing down the ball down the field when he is scrambling. He's the best. Him and Mahomes are the two best in the league at doing it. Yeah. So I think the focus for the Browns is you've got to figure out a way to pressure Lamar Jackson, but you've got to keep him in the pocket. You cannot let the scramble is where you're going to get beat on one of those plays that looks like a busted coverage, but you can't just expect these guys to cover for 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And so the Browns in games have done that to Lamar Jackson. They have kept him in the pocket. He's still a good passer, and he still makes plays. But if you don't let him hit those home run plays in chaos from the outside, I think you give yourself a better chance. And so I would hope the Browns maintain a little bit of discipline in their blitzes and maintain a little discipline in their pass rush. Keep him in the pocket, even if you don't get the sack. If you force him to hurry up his throws, I think that's the most important thing the Browns can do. I just don't know how you've got the number one scoring offense in the NFL and the last offense in the NFL going up against each other. We haven't broken 18 points yet this year. Do I think we do this week? I do. Because I think Jameis and I think Nick Chubb will get us to that. I just don't know if we're going to score enough to keep up with the Ravens. So I'm also going to pick the Ravens. I hate myself for it. You guys can all give me all the stuff in the world, but there's nothing to trust. There's nothing to trust about the Cleveland Browns.
So only the cat's picking the Browns out of the three of us. Look at that.
And I love the cat. You love the cat.
Man.
You got to figure out a Cleveland themed name for the cat.
Man.
No, listen, I think it's going to be the Ravens, but we'll see. That's why they play the games, and I do think you could see. I think you could see a little bit of an angry Browns team. I think they've been a little lackadaisical to start this year. I think you could see a little bit of an angry team after what's gone down over the last few days, and so I don't know if that translates to a win. I wouldn't put money on it, but I think you're right. I think we have maybe a more competitive game than what a lot of people think. So
yeah, the phrase I'll use is new life almost. You got new quarterback in there. Cleveland could be a team that just rallies around Jameis. They did it with Joe last year, and we saw what happened. So maybe it's just Jameis is the guy that comes in. He's the guy that they need to kind of galvanize the team, and they go from there. But yeah, I'm still going Ravens. But, you can't overlook any team in the NFL, especially not one that is experimenting with a quarterback that has had success in the league before.
That's right. All right, Kevin, I'm going to let you go. You cat. Congrats on the cat. That's exciting. Again, shout out to the driver, the real MVP of the show, the driver.
Absolutely, yes.
So shout out there. But again, check Kevin on the Locked On Ravens podcast. Go read and stuff on Ravens Wire if you want to know what the Ravens and their fans and what they're saying about this matchup with the Cleveland Browns. Kevin's a great place to get that information, and that way you don't have to go looking through a bunch of other Ravens stuff because who needs to do that? But just go to Kevin, check that stuff out. Kevin, man, first recurrent guest from season to season. I appreciate you for this. Love having you on again, and I'm sure I'll be reaching out for game number 2. Hopefully we get a good one this week.
Absolutely. Anytime you need me, more than happy to come back. Appreciate you having me as always.
All right, appreciate it, Kevin.
All right, appreciate it. Bye.
That's Kevin Oestreicher with the Locked On Ravens podcast. I know you guys want me to be more mean to the guy, but he's a good dude and he's smart. He's smart. I had a guy here last year from Pittsburgh. If you remember it, it'll be seared into your brain. I had a guy here from that covered the Steelers last year that talked about how he thought Kenny Pickett was going to be able to take advantage of matchups on the outside against Greedy Williams. And I was like, that dude doesn't play for us anymore. What are you talking about? So Kevin knows his stuff. He's really good at what he does. And he's a friend of the show, even though we can't be friends because of our team. But big shout out to Kevin. Go follow him online, Oestreicher34. You can figure out how to spell it. No, I'm just kidding. It'll be online. But I really appreciate having him come on. So listen, that's going to do it for this episode of the Doghouse, where I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry that I had to say nice things about the Ravens. I don't know what else to say about the Browns. I don't know what to say. But I will tell you, we'll let loose a little bit. So you guys go hang out. You got about an hour, a little over an hour I'm going to give you. Make sure your beers are cold. Go hang out. And in 1 hour and 7 minutes from right now at 9 p.m., I'm going to be right back here with Garage Beers, where we will let loose on the Cleveland Browns. Trust me when I tell you that. We're going to let loose on the Browns. But remember, when we on Garage Beers, we don't just talk Browns. So we're gonna celebrate the Cleveland Guardians. I know they lost in the ALCS, but I think there's a lot of good things to say about the Cleveland Guardians. So we're gonna have fun with that. And listen, the Cleveland Cavaliers start tomorrow. Cavaliers season kicks off tomorrow. So we got all that stuff and more. It's coming up on Garage Beers tonight at 9 p.m. Go grab your beers, come back and hang out with me. Until then, big shout out to Ian McBride in the background for helping me just put the show on. Shout out to Kevin Oestreicher, and shout out to you guys. You guys were great in the comments. It was lively. You guys had me laughing real hard at some points where I had to be trying to talk serious. So shout out to all of you. I hope you come back and join us for Garage Beers at 9 o'clock. And until next week and next week's episode of the Doghouse, see you later, and go Browns, everybody.